3 weeks ago, I discovered my husband wasn't just cheating on me with my boss, his entire family knew and was helping them hide it. Tonight, at the birthday party they're throwing in my honor, I'm not just serving cake. I'm serving federal indictments. This is the story of how I took back my life. If you believe no one should be silenced, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. I stood before the full-length mirror, allowing the fabric of the black dress to settle against my skin. It was a heavy, luxurious silk, a silent statement in a room thick with unspoken words. It felt less like clothing and more like a suit of armor I was donning for a battle I hadn't chosen. Tonight was my 39th birthday party. An event orchestrated by my mother-in-law, Eleanor, with a chilling enthusiasm that I now understood all too well. It wasn't a celebration, it was a stage, and I was the main act in a tragedy they had written for me. My reflection seemed foreign. A woman sculpted from ice, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes, my eyes, held a dangerous light. A cold fire that had been smoldering for 3 long weeks, beside my jewelry box, where my wedding ring used to sit, lay a simple, heavy cream-colored envelope. It held no card, no celebratory note. It was a weapon, patiently waiting, a bomb disguised as correspondence, timed to detonate and shatter the beautiful, gilded cage my life had become. The first crack in that cage had appeared 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday that began with the mundane rhythm of corporate life and ended in utter devastation. The email had arrived at 10 in the morning. Its subject line, a sterile command, urgent restructuring meeting. Your presence is required. As the Director of Corporate Compliance for Meridian Enterprises, urgent was my default setting. I spent my days navigating the treacherous waters of SEC regulations and corporate ethics, but this felt different. The summons came directly from Anastasia Blackwood's office, and Anastasia never involved me unless something was already burning. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like a slow ascent into a different atmosphere. The executive suite always had a distinct smell, a potent cocktail of old money, polished mahogany, and Anastasia's perfume, an exotic, overpowering scent that clung to the air like a promise of power. I pushed open the heavy oak door to her corner office and froze. It wasn't a restructuring meeting. It was a tribunal. Anastasia Blackwood, my boss, sat enthroned behind her desk, a marble and steel monstrosity that looked more like an altar. She was all sharp angles and calculated smiles. A predator in a designer suit. To her right, looking deeply uncomfortable in a chair far too modern for his taste, was my husband, Cody, and perched on the arm of his chair, a queen overseeing her domain, was my mother-in-law, Eleanor. They all turned to look at me as I entered. A silent, unified front. Their expressions were a grotesque performance of practiced sympathy. It was the look one gives to a wounded animal right before putting it out of its misery. My blood ran cold. My gaze fell to the center of the desk, to a thick stack of documents bound in the formal blue folder our legal department used. Even from the doorway, I could read the title, printed in bold. Unforgiving letters, separation and severance agreement. The world tilted on its axis. My breath caught. A painful knot in my chest. I tried to focus, to make sense of the impossible scene before me. My husband, my boss, my mother-in-law. This wasn't just my professional life being dismantled. It was my entire world. And then, through the fog of shock, I saw it. A small, intimate detail that screamed the truth, louder than any document ever could. Cody's hand was resting on the back of Anastasia's chair. His thumb was making slow, soothing circles on the expensive leather, a gesture of unconscious possession, of deep-seated familiarity, the kind of touch a husband gives his wife. In that instant, the floor fell away. The last 10 years of my life, the shared dreams, the inside jokes, the belief that we were a team, all of it curdled into a lie. The sound in the room vanished, replaced by a roaring in my ears. I looked desperately at Eleanor, the woman I had spent a decade trying to please, hoping for a lifeline, an explanation, a flicker of maternal outrage on my behalf. There was nothing. Her gaze was as hard and cold as polished granite. She wasn't here to save me. She was here to manage the fallout. They expected tears. They expected shouting, accusations, a complete emotional breakdown. It would have been easier for them, confirming their narrative that I was unstable, emotional, the hysterical wife who had to be handled. But they made a fatal miscalculation. They forgot that for 15 years, my entire career had been built on one principle: when chaos erupts, you do not feel. You observe. You document. You find the facts. A strange, Arctic calm settled over me. My grief was real, a gaping wound in my chest. But I packed it in ice and pushed it down. Right now, I was a compliance director at a hostile meeting. I walked forward, the sound of my heels against the imported hardwood floor a steady, defiant rhythm. I did not take the offered seat. Instead, I pulled my phone from my purse, my movements fluid and practiced. Pretending to silence it, I angled the screen down, opened the camera, and took a single, clear photo. It captured the damning tableau, the severance papers, Anastasia's triumphant smirk, and Cody's hand, forever betraying him, resting possessively on her chair. I put the phone away. This appears to be a significant breach of corporate policy, I said. My voice came out steady, devoid of emotion, as if I were discussing a quarterly audit, specifically, Meridian's Ethics Code. Section 3. Subsection B, which strictly prohibits relationships between direct supervisors and the spouses of their subordinates. The legal and financial exposure here is considerable. I'll need to review this. I turned my back on their stunned faces and walked out, my spine ramrod straight. The mask didn't slip until the elevator doors closed, and my reflection showed a woman whose hands were shaking so violently she had to clench them into fists to make them stop. Back in the safety of my own office, the mundane world felt like an anchor. Ibuds de Leo, my assistant. He was a good kid, bright, ambitious, and one of the few people in the building I trusted implicitly. He appeared a moment later, a question in his eyes. Leo, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to be discreet. He leaned in, his voice low. Anything. Bianca, are you okay? I'm fine. I lied. I'm working on a confidential budget audit for the executive board. I need Anastasia's travel schedule and her corporate Amex statements for the last 6 months. I need the fully itemized receipts for everything. You got it, he said, his loyalty unwavering. While I waited, I stared out my window at the city below. A sprawling monument to ambition and secrets. My husband, my boss, my family. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a conspiracy. How long had this been going on? How many lies had I unknowingly swallowed? An hour later, Leo placed a file on my desk, his expression troubled. There's something you should see. he said quietly. Every time you flew to London for the quarterly consolidation, Anastasia flew to San Francisco for a tech conference. They were always on the same dates. My stomach twisted. Thank you, Leo. That will be all for now. I opened the file with trembling hands. It was a paper trail of their affair. A ledger of my humiliation. 5-star hotels in Napa Valley. Intimate dinners for 2 at restaurants with month-long waiting lists. Thousands of dollars spent on designer clothes. And then, the final brutal blow, a receipt from Tiffany & Co. for a $15,000 diamond tennis bracelet. At the bottom of every page, scrawled in confident, familiar handwriting, was the signature of the approving manager, my husband, Cody. He had been lavishing my boss with gifts, paid for by the company where I had worked my way up. A company whose rules I was paid to enforce. That night, Cody came home with a bouquet of white lilies, their funereal scent filling our silent apartment. He launched into a performance worthy of an Oscar. A masterclass in gaslighting. Honey, you completely misunderstood the situation, he began, his voice dripping with faux concern. Anastasia sees potential in me. She's a mentor. Eleanor was there to help us navigate this amazing opportunity for our family. Is a $15,000 bracelet part of her mentorship program, I asked? My voice flat. He actually sighed, as if I were a child being difficult. That was a corporate gift for a client's wife. Bianca, you have to spend money to make money. This is a level of business you just haven't been exposed to yet. The condescension was breathtaking. He stood there, in the home I had helped pay for, and insulted my intelligence while lying to my face. I didn't argue. I just nodded, letting him believe he had successfully managed the situation. He had no idea he was only sealing his own fate. The following days were a study in surrealism. I moved through my life like an undercover agent. At home, I was the wounded, confused wife. At work, the diligent compliance director. And at night, I was a detective, poring over data, connecting dots, my grief slowly crystallizing into a cold, hard purpose. While looking for an old tax document in our home office, I saw a framed photo from a Father's Day several years ago. In it, my father-in-law, Richard, stood proudly, the expensive Mont Blanc pen I'd given him gleaming in his pocket. I remembered the day I gave it to him, how I'd hoped it would be a bridge, a sign of my respect. He had accepted it with polite, distant gratitude. Staring at the photo, an idea sparked. The pen was a symbol of their world, expensive, elegant, and deceptive. I spent the next hour online, purchasing a state-of-the-art micro recorder, one small enough to fit inside the shell of a Mont Blanc pen. The confirmation that this was a full-blown family conspiracy came the next Saturday. At a cousin's wedding, it was a sprawling, opulent event. A perfect showcase for the family's carefully curated image of success and unity. As I stood by the champagne fountain, forcing a smile, Cody's older brother, William, swaggered over, his face flushed with alcohol. He draped a heavy arm around my shoulders. Bianca, he said, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. Just wanted to say, you're a real class act. A real trooper. I'm sorry. This whole thing, he said, gesturing vaguely with his glass, sloshing champagne on the floor. With Cody and Blackwood, it's been tough on everybody. You know, the whole family knows how hard you're taking it. We're all proud of you for being so mature about it. The whole family knows. The string quartet faded away. The laughter and chatter of the party dissolved into a dull roar. The only thing I could feel was the weight of his hand on my shoulder, the weight of their collective betrayal pressing down on me. They weren't just aware of the affair, they were managing it. They were proud of me for quietly accepting my own destruction for their convenience. I was not family. I was a problem to be solved. A loose end to be tied up. I looked across the lawn and saw them all, Eleanor. Richard. Chloe. Cody laughing together. A perfect family portrait. A nest of vipers. Standing there, surrounded by enemies disguised as family, the last vestiges of the woman I used to be fell away. The grief, the hurt, the shock, they burned away like fog in a harsh, bright sun, and in their place, something new and diamond-hard began to form. It was not hatred. It was purpose. They had written me as a victim in their sordid little play. They had no idea I was about to rewrite the entire script. The drive home from the wedding was a silent, hollow affair. Cody, oblivious in a wine-induced haze, hummed along to some forgotten song on the radio. I stared out the passenger window, watching the suburban mansions blur into streaks of light, each one a potential stage for its own secret. Silent betrayals. William's words, slurred and careless, had been a gift of final, brutal confirmation that severed the last thread of hope I didn't even know I was still clinging to. The whole family knows. It wasn't a secret I had discovered. It was a burden they had been carrying, and they were annoyed by its weight. My pain was an inconvenience to their comfort. I slept in the guest room that night. The next morning, a gray, dreary Sunday. I packed a small overnight bag while Cody was in the shower. I left a short, sterile note on the kitchen counter. Staying with my sister for a few days. Need some space. It was a lie. My sister lived in Oregon. But it was a lie that would buy me time. The most precious commodity I now possessed. On Monday morning, I didn't drive to the gleaming glass tower of Meridian Enterprises. Instead, I found myself parked in the far corner of a Starbucks lot. The engine off. A lukewarm coffee growing cold in the cup holder. The sky was the color of unwashed slate. I watched people hurry in and out, their faces set with the usual Monday morning resolve. Completely unaware that my own world had been reduced to a war room of one. For an hour, I just sat there, letting the full scope of their treachery wash over me. They had planned to discard me like a corporate asset that was no longer profitable. They had discussed my future, my life, and decided it was disposable. They had underestimated me. They saw a wife, a daughter-in-law. They had forgotten I was a compliance director who had dismantled multi-million-dollar fraud schemes with less evidence than I now held in my phone. The victim died at that wedding. In her place sat a woman with a singular, chilling purpose. I took a deep breath, pulled out my laptop, and tethered it to my phone's hotspot. I didn't search for divorce lawyers. That was their game. Their timeline. I typed a different set of words into the search bar: Best Forensic Accountant, Chicago Fraud Investigation. The name that came up repeatedly, being cited in financial journals and legal publications, was Sarah Jenkins. Her tagline was simple: "We find the truth in the numbers." I dialed her office number before I could lose my nerve. Sarah Jenkins's office was the complete antithesis of Anastasia's. There was no mahogany, no panoramics view. It was a small, brutally efficient space in a nondescript building in the Loop, smelling of clean paper and strong, black coffee. Sarah herself was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a demeanor that wasted no time on pleasantries. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered a pen and a legal pad. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice crisp. "Start from the beginning. And do not leave anything out." For the next hour, I laid it all out: the meeting, the documents, the photo on my phone, the itemized corporate expenses, the trips that mirrored my own. I spoke in the same detached, clinical tone I used when presenting a case to the board, compartmentalizing the emotional agony of it all. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Herr Fingerstiepel ohnehin. This is a mess, Mrs. Thompson," she said, her gaze unwavering. "But an affair funded by corporate expense fraud is, unfortunately, not uncommon. The family involvement makes it distasteful. But what is it you want from me?" "The affair is a symptom, Ms. Jenkins. The disease is something else," I said, leaning forward. "My husband's family. They're not sentimental. Eleanor and Richard worship at the altar of money and status. For them to endorse this? To risk a scandal of this magnitude, the payoff has to be bigger than Cody's happiness. I need to know what that is. I need to know why." A flicker of respect entered her eyes. "You think the money trail goes deeper than the expense reports?" "I know it does," I said. "I can feel it." "All right," she said, sliding a contract across the desk. "My retainer is $10,000. I will start with a deep dive into your husband's company, Hawthorne Global, and any and all financial entanglements it has with Meridian Enterprises or Anastasia Blackwood, directly or indirectly. You'll have your first report within a week." That week was the longest of my life. I moved into a residential hotel suite, a sterile, anonymous space where I could work without fear of being watched. At the office, I was a ghost, doing my job with robotic efficiency, avoiding eye contact with Anastasia, speaking to her only through emails. At home, I let Cody's increasingly frantic calls go to voicemail. Let them wonder. Let them grow nervous. Their certainty was their greatest weakness. During that time, the micro-recorder, cleverly disguised within the shell of the Mont Blanc pen, arrived. I practiced using it until the small, silent click of the activation button became second nature. Then, I prepared for my first move. I called Eleanor. I pitched my voice to sound broken, tearful. A woman on the verge of surrender. "Eleanor." I choked out. "Can I please come see you? I don't know what to do. I need my mother." The lie tasted like acid in my mouth, but her response was instantaneous and dripping with triumphant pity. "Of course, darling. Come right over." Her house was, as always, immaculate. A monument to her husband's success and her own relentless social climbing. She sat me down on a white silk sofa, handed me a cup of tea I didn't touch, and held my hand. It was like being held by a beautifully manicured statue. I placed my purse on the glass coffee table between us. The pen recorder inside aimed directly at her. "I just don't understand," I began, letting a tear slide down my cheek. Why wouldn't you tell me?" Eleanor patted my hand, her expression one of profound, condescending wisdom. "Darling Bianca, sometimes in life, and in business, we have to form strategic partnerships, alliances that may seem unconventional from the outside, but are necessary for the greater good. What Cody and Anastasia have is a powerful synergy. It's going to elevate this entire family. We just needed you to be mature enough to see the bigger picture." The corporate jargon, applied to the destruction of my marriage, was so obscene it was almost laughable. I kept my face a mask of sorrow. So, this is good for Hawthorne Global. Her eyes lit up. Good, Bianca. It's a lifeline. Anastasia is a visionary. The partnership between them is going to secure our family's future for generations. A little personal discomfort now is a small price to pay for that kind of legacy. I had it. Her admission. Her motive. Her cold-blooded justification. All captured in pristine digital audio. I stayed for another 20 minutes, playing the part of the grieving wife, before making my excuses and leaving. As I drove away, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollowed out, as if I had just excavated the last bit of my own naivete. The call from Sarah Jenkins came 2 days later. I was sitting in my hotel room, staring at a wall, when my phone buzzed. Bianca, she said, her voice tight with an energy I hadn't heard before. I have it. It's bigger than you thought. I sat up, my heart pounding. Tell me. Hawthorne Global was on the verge of bankruptcy 4 months ago. She began. They were over-leveraged. They'd lost 2 major clients, and they were days away from defaulting on their loans. They were finished. But they weren't, I said, my voice barely a whisper. No. Sarah confirmed, because 3 months ago, they received a capital injection of exactly $2 million. It came from a newly formed LLC in Delaware with an untraceable name. An angel investor. It seemed. And it wasn't. No. I spent the last 48 hours pulling in corporation documents and tracing the wire transfer. The LLC was funded by a single entity, a subsidiary of Meridian Enterprises Venture Capital Division. The transfer of $2 million out of Meridian's Opportunity Fund was classified as a strategic investment in emerging AI technology. It was authorized, personally and unilaterally, by one person. I closed my eyes. Anastasia Blackwood. Yes, Sarah said. She didn't just fund her affair with your company's expense account. Bianca. She embezzled $2 million to bail out your husband's failing company. This isn't just an ethics violation. This is grand larceny. This is wire fraud. This is a federal crime. I hung up the phone, the silence of the room pressing in on me. $2 million. That was my price. That was the value they had placed on my life. My marriage. My dignity. It was the reason for their unity. Their cruelty. It all made a horrifying kind of sense. My next target was Richard. I invited him to dinner at a Keat. Old-fashioned steakhouse downtown. A place he loved. He accepted. Assuming I was coming to him for guidance. To appeal to the patriarch. I wore a simple dress and brought a bottle of his favorite expensive scotch as a peace offering. And in the pocket of my blazer, I had the pen. This time, I didn't hide it in my purse. I took it out and placed it on the table, next to my water glass, as if I'd been taking notes earlier. Under the guise of seeking his business wisdom, I guided the conversation to Hawthorne Global. Eleanor mentioned that things are going incredibly well. I said, Cody is usually so stressed. But he seems different lately. Richard puffed out his chest, swallowing his victory along with a large bite of filet mignon. It was a miraculous turnaround. He boomed, his voice low but filled with pride. My boy always had it in him. But this Anastasia, she saw his potential. She moved heaven and earth for him. That kind of support, from a woman in her position, It's invaluable. It's the kind of unorthodox alliance that builds empires. He kept talking, and I kept listening. The tiny device on the table silently recording every self-incriminating word. He believed he was explaining the world to a foolish, emotional woman. He had no idea he was writing the closing argument for the prosecution. That weekend was a blur of methodical fury. I didn't sleep. Fueled by coffee and a cold, burning rage. I compiled everything into a single, inessayable digital dossier. The photo from Anastasia's office, the travel schedules, the itemized expense reports, the full report from Sarah Jenkins, detailing the shell company and the $2 million transfer, and finally, the audio files from my conversations with Eleanor and Richard, transcribed and time-stamped. It was a perfect, self-contained narrative of greed, conspiracy, and staggering arrogance. On Sunday night, exactly 1 week before my birthday party, I took the final step. I opened a new, encrypted email account. I drafted a meticulously detailed message, summarizing the evidence and attaching the dossier. I addressed it to the head of the SEC's Enforcement Division, the entire board of directors of Meridian Enterprises, the U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, and a contact I had at the Wall Street Journal. Then, I used the schedule send function. The email would be delivered at precisely 9 p.m. next Saturday. In the middle of my birthday party, the ticking clock had been set. The following Wednesday, my phone rang. It was Eleanor. Her voice was pure honey, laced with poison. "Bianca. Darling." She cooed. "I'm just calling to confirm you'll be at your party on Saturday. We're all so looking forward to celebrating you. And, darling," she added, her voice dropping, "I do hope you've had time to think. We are all so eager to move forward. And we trust you'll handle yourself with the maturity this situation requires." I held the phone, a cold smile touching my lips. "Don't worry, Eleanor," I said, my voice sweet as sugar. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. I promise to be everything you expect me to be." After I hung up, I walked over to my desk. I took out the cream-colored envelope, the one I had prepared for the party. Inside, there was no lengthy report. There was only a single sheet of high-quality paper. At the top, in bold, centered text, were the words "Summary of Allegations Wire Fraud, Embezzlement, and Corporate Conspiracy." Below it were 5 bullet points, each one a nail for their coffins. This wasn't the bomb. This was just the fuse. The real bomb was digital, silent, and 30 seconds away from its scheduled detonation in my outbox. I sealed the envelope. A sense of profound, terrifying, calm, settling over me. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was walk into it. Of course, I will continue the narrative seamlessly from the end of Chapter 2. This chapter will focus on the execution of Bianca's plan at the party, meticulously following the established outline to build tension and deliver a cathartic climax. The day of the party arrived not with a storm, but with a quiet, unnerving stillness. The sky was a vast, empty blue, and the air held the first crisp promise of autumn. I spent the morning in the sterile quiet of my hotel room, not preparing for a celebration, but for a performance. I moved with a deliberate, almost meditative calm. There was no room for anger or grief now. Those were luxuries for a different life. Today required precision. It required the cold, dispassionate focus of a surgeon. Every word, every gesture, Every feigned hesitation had been rehearsed in my mind until it was muscle memory. As evening fell, I began the final transformation. I put on the black dress. Its silk fabric a cool, familiar weight against my skin. It was the same dress I had worn the day I'd first met Eleanor. A detail I was sure no one but me would remember. I applied my makeup with a steady hand, creating a mask of weary resignation. A touch of shadow under the eyes to suggest sleepless nights. A paler shade of lipstick to imply a loss of vitality. I needed to look like a woman who had been defeated. A woman ready to accept the unacceptable. I picked up the cream-colored envelope. It felt heavier than a single sheet of paper should. I slipped it into my small, elegant clutch. Next to my phone and the Mont Blanc pen, my heart was a steady, rhythmic drum. Not of fear, but of anticipation. I was ready. Driving to their home in the wealthy, tree-lined suburb felt like crossing into enemy territory. Each perfectly manicured lawn, each stately brick colonial, was a testament to the world they had built, a world of appearances, of secrets, kept behind closed doors. I pulled up to the valet, handing him my keys with a polite nod, and walked towards the front door. The moment I stepped inside, the assault on the senses began. A wave of warm air, thick with the scent of expensive floral arrangements and roasting hors d'oeuvres. The sound of a jazz trio playing softly in the grand foyer. The low, buzzing murmur of 50 of their closest friends. A curated audience for my public humiliation. And then, there she was, Eleanor, gliding towards me. A vision in winter white. Her smile as bright and brittle as spun sugar. "Bianca. Darling, you came," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. She enveloped me in a hug, her embrace stiff and her cheek as dry as paper against mine. "We were so worried. You look tired. My dear, you must let us take care of you." "Thank you for having me, Eleanor," I said, my voice soft, just a little broken. Over her shoulder, I saw Cody. He was standing with Anastasia. And for a horrifying second, they looked like the hosts. He was laughing at something she'd said. His hand resting in the small of her back, he saw me and his smile faltered. Replaced by a look of pained gravity, he approached, detaching himself from her with a visible reluctance. "Honey," he said, taking my arm. His touch felt like a brand. "I'm so glad you're here. This means everything to us." Us. The word hung in the air between us. A toxic cloud. I gave him a weak, watery smile. Anastasia simply gave me a cool, measured nod from across the room. The nod of a victor who can afford to be magnanimous. The first hour was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Guests would approach me, their eyes filled with a morbid, pitying curiosity. They'd ask how I was doing, their voices hushed, their questions lingering on the unspoken. I played my part perfectly, offering vache, sad smiles and murmuring about how things have been difficult. I could feel Eleanor watching me from across the room, her expression one of smug approval. I was performing exactly as she'd hoped. Finally, the moment came. Eleanor tapped a crystal glass with a silver spoon. The high, clear chime silencing the room. She stood in the center of the living room, a benevolent queen addressing her court. "Friends, family," she began, beaming. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our dear Bianca's 39th birthday. This past year has been one of transition for our family, and transitions require wisdom. They require maturity. Her eyes found mine across the crowded room. A silent, public command. So tonight, I'd like to toast to Bianca. A toast to a new year. A new chapter. And to her grace in accepting the new beginnings that life presents. For all of us. A polite smattering of applause followed. The hidden meaning was as clear as the champagne in their glasses. Be a good girl and accept your replacement quietly. I raised my own glass. Met haar Hase. And took a slow, deliberate sip. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. A short while later, as I was pretending to admire a hideous piece of modern art, my father-in-law, Richard, appeared at my elbow. Bianca, he said, his voice a low rumble. We need to talk. All of us. In the library. If you please. This was it. The final act of their play. I nodded mutely and followed him. The library door. A heavy slab of dark wood. Closed behind us with a soft, final thud. The room was Richard's sanctuary. Lined with leather-bound books he'd never read. Cody, Eleanor, and Anastasia were already there. Arranged in a semicircle of armchairs. It was an intervention. An execution squad dressed in cashmere and pearls. Sit down. Bianca, Eleanor said, gesturing to a lone chair placed in the center. A velvet-upholstered hot seat. I sat, clutching my purse on my lap. They began to speak. Their voices overlapping in a carefully rehearsed chorus of concern and condescension. We are doing this because we love you. Cody started, his voice resonating with false sincerity. We need to find the best path forward for everyone's emotional health. What Cody and I have, Anastasia interjected, her voice smooth and imperious, is not something we chose. It's simply what is. These feelings are complicated, powerful. The mature, adult thing to do is to acknowledge reality. The family name has to be protected, Eleanor added, her tone sharp. A messy, public divorce would be devastating for everyone. For Hawthorne, for Meridian. We need to handle this transition with dignity and discretion. For your own good. You must see that. I listened, letting their words wash over me. They spoke of maturity, of dignity, of reality, all while defending the most profound act of betrayal. They weren't just asking me to accept an affair, they were demanding I become a silent, willing accomplice to my own erasure. When they had finished, a heavy silence filled the room. All eyes were on me. They were waiting for my surrender. I took a shaky breath, let my shoulders slump, and looked at the floor. I let the silence stretch, forcing them to lean in, desperate for my capitulation. You're right, I whispered, the words barely audible. I looked up, my eyes wide with feigned, broken acceptance. You're all right. I understand. I'll be mature. The relief in the room was a physical thing. It was a collective exhale. An unclenching of jaws. Cody's face flooded with gratitude. Eleanor gave a small, satisfied nod. They had won. They had broken me. I stood up, as if to leave. Then, I paused at the door. Just one more thing, I said, my voice still small. I turned to Richard, who had been silent throughout. The silent judge. I need to hear it from you. Dad, when we spoke at dinner, you called this an unorthodox alliance that builds empires. Do you truly believe that? That this arrangement is a worthy foundation for an empire. The pen was on the small table next to my purse, its tiny microphone absorbing every syllable. Richard was taken aback, but his arrogance quickly won out. "Of course," he said, puffing out his chest slightly. "Business is not for the faint of heart. Sometimes, difficult sacrifices are required for progress." "Thank you," I said softly. That's all I needed to hear. I walked out of the library, leaving them to bask in their victory. I walked directly to the center of the living room, right where Eleanor had stood for her toast. The jazz trio had just finished a song. In the momentary quiet, I spoke, my voice no longer small, but clear and carrying, cutting through the party's buzz. "Excuse me, everyone," I said. "Could I have your attention for just a moment?" A sudden, sharp silence fell over the room. Every head turned towards me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the library door open. Cody, Eleanor, Anastasia, and Richard emerged, their faces a mixture of confusion and annoyance at this unplanned interruption. "I just want to thank you all for coming to celebrate with me," I said, my gaze sweeping across the faces of their friends, their business partners, their community. My wonderful family just had a very frank, very honest conversation with me in the library. They've helped me see the path forward with such clarity. I turned my body to face the four of them as they stood frozen by the doorway. They have convinced me that the love between my husband, Cody, and my boss, Anastasia, is real and powerful. They have convinced me that my sacrifice is necessary for the greater good of the family business. A wave of murmurs and confused gasps rippled through the crowd. I let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. And to commemorate this new beginning, this unorthodox alliance, I have a small gift of my own. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the cream-colored envelope. I walked towards them, each step deliberate, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the glasses. I stopped directly in front of Cody, whose face was now a mask of dawning horror. I held the envelope out to him. "This is for you," I said, my voice calm and even, "for all of you." He took it, his hand trembling. He probably thought it was the signed divorce papers, my final act of surrender. He fumbled with the seal, his fingers clumsy. He pulled out the single sheet of paper. His eyes scanned the first line. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly, gray pallor. The paper fluttered from his nerveless fingers and drifted to the floor. Anastasia, ever the executive, snatched it up before it landed. I watched her read it. I saw her perfect composure crack, a fissure of pure panic spreading across her features. Eleanor and Richard crowded behind her, their eyes wide with disbelief as they read the heading over her shoulder, "Summary of Allegations Wire Fraud, Embezzlement, and Corporate Conspiracy." Before any of them could speak, I turned back to my audience. My voice was no longer calm. It was steel. "My husband didn't just cheat on me with my boss," I announced, my voice ringing through the silent, cavernous room. "She didn't just help him. He embezzled $2 million from Meridian Enterprises, the company I have given 15 years of my life to, in order to save his family's failing business. And this entire family, his mother, his father, his brother, they all knew. They helped him cover it up. They orchestrated this party tonight to silence me." The chaos erupted. A collective, horrified gasp. A champagne glass shattered on the floor. Cody fell to his knees, not in a dramatic plea, but in a limp, boneless collapse, babbling my name over and over. Bianca. No. Please. Please. Eleanor let out a strangled cry, her hand flying to her pearls. You lying little bitch, she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. You've ruined us. Anastasia stood rigid, the paper crumpled in her white-knuckled fist, her face a terrifying mask of fury and disbelief. Richard was sputtering, speechless, his face a mottled, apoplectic red. The guests began to back away, some in shock, others already pulling out their phones, sensing the social carnage of the decade unfolding before their eyes. I looked down at the wreckage of their lives, at the 4 people who had tried to destroy me. I felt nothing. No triumph. No anger. Not even satisfaction. Just a quiet, empty peace. The war was over. I didn't ruin you, I said, my voice clear and steady, loud enough for everyone to hear over Cody's pathetic sobs. You built this prison yourselves. I just opened the door. I turned my back on the pandemonium. I walked, not ran, through the stunned crowd, past the open-mouthed waiters and the silenced jazz trio. I walked straight out the front door, into the cool, clean night air. I didn't look back. As I reached the bottom of the stone steps, a soft chime came from the clutch in my hand. I pulled out my phone. On the screen was a simple, automated notification. Your message has been sent. Saturday, 9:00 p.m. The chime of the notification faded, but the words on the screen seemed to burn in the cool night air. Your message has been sent. 9 o'clock. The digital guillotine had fallen. I slipped the phone back into my clutch, my movements calm and unhurried. Behind me, the chaos inside the house was a formless, distant roar, like the sound of a collapsing star. It was their world ending, not mine. I had already left it. I didn't wait for the valet. I had parked my own car a few blocks away. A small act of foresight in a night of grand strategy. The walk down the silent, tree-lined street was surreal. The crisp air was a clean, welcome shock after the suffocating atmosphere of the party. I passed under the soft, golden glow of streetlights, my shadow long and solitary behind me. There was no elation, no triumphant surge of adrenaline. There was only a profound, hollow quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has passed, leaving a landscape irrevocably changed. I had spent weeks channeling my grief and rage into a single W-tangely routine. Perfect weapon. Now that it had been fired, all that was left was the echoing silence. When I reached my car, my phone began to buzz frantically. It was Cody. I watched his name and photo flash on the screen. A ghost from a life that was no longer mine. I declined the call. He called again. Immediately, I declined again, then held my finger on his contact photo and, without a moment of hesitation, pressed block. A small, simple act of finality. One by one, I blocked Eleanor, Richard, and William. I was severing the limbs of a diseased tree. The drive back to my anonymous hotel was spent in that same deep silence. The city lights of Chicago smeared across my windshield. A river of disconnected stars. I was a stranger in my own city. A ghost in my own life. And yet, for the first time in a very long time, I felt the first, fragile, stirring of freedom. The shockwave hit on Monday morning. I was in my hotel room, drinking a cup of truly terrible coffee and watching a financial news channel with the volume low, and then I saw it. A breaking news banner crawled across the bottom of the screen. CEO Anastasia Blackwood of Meridian Enterprises suspended pending internal investigation into financial misconduct. They used her official corporate headshot, a photo of a smiling, confident woman at the peak of her power. Now, it was a mugshot for a white-collar crime. The news anchor spoke in grave, serious tones about anonymous tips, a detailed dossier of evidence sent to the board over the weekend, and rumors of embezzlement on a massive scale. A few moments later, the screen cut to live footage from outside the Meridian Tower. A line of dark sedans was parked at the curb, and men and women in dark suits, clearly identifiable as FBI agents, were carrying sealed evidence boxes out of the front door. I didn't cheer. I didn't even smile. I simply took a slow, deep breath. The first truly full breath I had taken in weeks. It was real. The truth was out. No longer just my private burden, but a public fact. Cold and irrefutable. The dominoes fell with breathtaking speed. A week later, a small article in the business section reported that Hawthorne Global had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, its assets to be liquidated. The $2 million investment had been frozen by federal investigators, and without it, the entire hollow enterprise had collapsed in on itself. Another article mentioned a prominent suburban mansion, the home of Richard and Eleanor Thompson, being put on the market in a rush, its price slashed for a quick sale to cover their mounting legal fees. Anastasia was officially fired by the board of directors. Cody, Richard, and Eleanor were all named as persons of interest in the ongoing federal investigation. The world they had built, a world founded on deceit and my silent compliance, had been utterly and completely annihilated. Cody tried. Of course. For weeks. My blocked folder filled up with his desperate, pathetic attempts to reach me. One night, morbid curiosity got the better of me, and I listened to a few of the voicemails. They were a pathetic symphony of a man completely broken. The first was pure rage. How could you do this? Bianca, you destroyed my family, you destroyed everything, for what, a little revenge? The next was a sniveling plea, baby. Please. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we can fix this. Just talk to me. Tell me what they want. I'll do anything. Please. I love you. I've always loved you. The last one I listened to was the most telling. It was a long, rambling, drunken message left at 3 a.m. He wasn't angry or sad. He was just bewildered. I don't get it. He slurred. This was supposed to work. It was all supposed to work. We had a plan. We had a plan. That was the heart of it. He wasn't sorry for the betrayal. He was just sorry he'd been caught. I deleted the messages. All of them. And never listened to another one again. My lawyer handled everything. 3 months after the party, I sat in my attorney's quiet, sunlit office. The final divorce decree lay on the table in front of me. It had been uncontested. Cody was in no position to argue about assets he no longer had. My lawyer slid the document towards me, pointing to the signature line. Once you sign this, it's over, she said gently. You'll be free. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. I looked at the line where my name was supposed to go. For 10 years, I had been Bianca Thompson. It was a name that had felt like a warm coat, then a heavy burden, and finally, a cage. I put the pen to the paper and, in a clear, steady hand, I signed my name. Not the name of my husband, The name of my father. The name that was truly mine. Bianca Garrison. As I wrote the final letter, a profound sense of peace washed over me. It wasn't the giddy thrill of victory or the dark satisfaction of revenge. It was the quiet, simple relief of a prisoner who has just been handed the key to her own cell. A great, crushing weight. I didn't even realize I was still carrying simply dissolved. I was no longer their wife, their daughter-in-law, their victim, or their adversary. I was just me. 6 months can feel like a lifetime, or it can pass in the blink of an eye. For me, it was both. I left Chicago, the city that held nothing but ghosts for me now. I moved to New York. Not to the glittering towers of Manhattan, but to a small, quiet apartment in Queens. And with the money from my severance package from Meridian, they had been more than generous. Eager to distance themselves from the scandal, I started over. I now stand on the sidewalk, looking up at a freshly painted sign hanging above a modest storefront. It reads, In simple, elegant letters, Garrison Compliance Consulting. My name, my company, my life. I don't work with multi-billion-dollar corporations anymore. My clients are small business owners, startup founders, immigrant entrepreneurs trying to navigate the labyrinth of American commerce. I help them set up honest, transparent systems. I protect them from the kind of people who see rules not as a framework for integrity, but as obstacles to be circumvented. My work has meaning now. A purpose that goes beyond a paycheck. Last week, a letter arrived, forwarded from my old address. The handwriting was familiar. It was from Leo. He had survived the purge at Meridian and was now a junior director. The letter was short. A simple check-in from a friend. He included a final update. Thinking I would want to know, Anastasia had taken a plea deal. In exchange for her testimony against the others, she was sentenced to 5 years in a minimum security federal prison. Richard and Eleanor were still drowning in legal battles. Their reputations destroyed. Their fortune gone. And Cody. Cody had been charged as a co-conspirator. His trial was set for the fall. I read the words. And the most surprising thing happened. I felt nothing. No spark of satisfaction. No lingering bitterness. It was like reading a news story about strangers in a city I had never visited. Their fates were no longer tied to mine. Their chapter was over. Mine was just beginning. I fold the letter and slip it into my pocket. I look up at the cherry blossom trees in the park across the street. Their branches covered in a riot of pink and white. It's a beautiful spring day. For the first time, I understand what true victory is. It wasn't the moment I revealed their crimes at the party. It wasn't the news of their downfall. Victory is this. Standing here, on my own 2 feet, under my own name, breathing in the sweet air of a life I built myself. Not from the ashes of my old one, but from the solid ground of my own truth. The life they tried to take from me is gone. And in its place is something smaller, quieter, and infinitely more real. And it is all mine.